10 True Scary Reddit Stories. Story 1. Alexa starts speaking to nobody in the middle of the night, so this began in February. I got my Alexa 4 or 3 years ago, I think, and it has worked perfectly all until 2 months ago. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood. I am friendly with most of my neighbors, though they are mostly elderly people, so I don't really talk to them at all. I am saying this because I suspect that someone is going into my house at night, or doing something that triggers the Alexa to speak. I'll just tell the story of when it first happened, and what it says. It first happened at around 4-5 a.m. I woke up to the Alexa at full volume saying something that I couldn't make out because it was muffled. My heart was racing, and I was genuinely so confused, so I stood up and went to my door in my bedroom. My Alexa is downstairs in my kitchen, and my bedroom was upstairs, so I had to open the door in my bedroom to hear what the Alexa was saying. Once I opened the door, I could make out something along the lines of, "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that." And then, after a few seconds of silence, it said that it didn't know that one. I don't know what that means, but my guess is that it is a reply to a question about a joke or a song name, since that's what an Alexa usually says when asked a question like that. Over the next few minutes, I stood at the doorway, my heart still beating, and the Alexa would be quiet for about 30 seconds before saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that." It would stay silent again for a few more seconds, and then it would say it again. I didn't want to go down, to be honest, because I was so scared. After a few minutes, it went silent and I went back to bed, but I couldn't go to sleep. So I went downstairs at around 7 a.m., and nothing had happened. The Alexa was turned off. Now, at this point, I was horrified, but what made it worse was that when I went to bed that same night, it repeated the same things, and it has been doing that for the last 2 months. Yes, on the third day in a row, I went downstairs to check, but nobody was there and nothing was off. The Alexa was still speaking, but after about 2 minutes it stopped by itself. I plugged it out after, and then thank God it stopped. I kept the Alexa in my utility room, and decided not to take it out of there ever again. And I probably wouldn't have posted anything about this if it wasn't for what happened a week ago. I had forgotten about the Alexa by this point and had just gone on with my life, but one night, as I went to sleep, I heard it again. Now I want to clarify that I am not trying to make a creepy story here at all. I am genuinely scared and confused on what is happening here. I went down after hearing it, saying the same phrase on loop like it had before, and it was plugged in again into the kitchen, playing the phrases like somebody was talking to it. I thought it had maybe just malfunctioned up until this point, but then I knew something was wrong, obviously. I took out the Alexa and drove up to my parents' house. I gave it to them and told them they could do whatever they wanted with it, but it was glitched. Nothing has happened since then, but I am seriously scared and worried for what is happening. I have so many questions. I will update if anything else happens. Update: I called a friend over to check the attic with me thanks to Real Worth 88 suggestion, and we found nothing in there, thankfully. Nothing much has happened since I made this post. My house has been relatively quiet. I keep telling myself that the Alexa was glitched, but it doesn't explain how it moved by itself back to my kitchen. There is still the horrifying possibility that there's someone living in my house, or that I am hallucinating and moved the Alexa by myself. But I'm not sure. I will be putting up cameras in my house to see what happens at night, in case I catch anything odd. Thanks to everyone trying to help, and I will update you tomorrow on what I see on them. Story 2, when I was a little boy, there was a monster under my bed. When I was a little kid, I'd how old, 7 or 8 at the oldest. Me and my twin sister shared a bedroom. Our beds were directly across the room from each other, and we'd frequently chat all night. We'd gone out with our mom and older siblings and came home very late at night for a 7-year-old. Maybe it was 10 p.m. lol. When we got home, it was off to bed with us, and we laid in the dark and talked for a while. My sister seemed really strange, like frozen, unmoving, and not talking. I went and got in bed with her and asked her what was wrong. She said that we had to be brave and run to Mom's room, because there was a monster looking at her from beneath my bed that I was just previously laying in. I turned away from her and looked into the dark void that was beneath my bed, and I felt it too. There was a monster under the bed. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it watching us. I think we counted to 10 quietly and ran to my mom's room to tell her about the monster. As we stood in the mouth of our mother's doorway crying and hyperventilating, a man ran by our mother's room, slammed the door, and escaped out the back door off the kitchen. A man had broken in while we were away and hidden under my bed. I don't think about this often, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my sister never sensed him. Spooky shit, people are terrifying. So sorry this is written out poorly. I'm on a 15-minute break from work with not much time left on it. Story 3, my girlfriend and I had an odd experience in the forest. We still can't shake the feeling. This story takes place not even 24 hours ago when my girlfriend and I decided to take a short walk in her town's forest preserve, as we finally started getting warmer weather. The trail starts off on a barren, hilly field that oversees only a handful of houses a few yards away. When we started walking, the sun was beginning to set. The sky was painted in pastel pinks and blues that was slowly fading into a dark, deep blue. Beautiful to see walking in the plains, but as soon as we walked into the forest, the comfort and safety of the childlike colors were covered by a canopy of trees that barely started growing leaves. The trail immediately went from an open field into the forest. The trees were sharp, standing straight up. No imperfections in the trunks, no overgrown roots reaching to grab up from the ground, no branches threatening to smack us in the face. As we continued on the trail, just walking and talking as girls do best, all of a sudden both of our eyes darted to the ground as my girlfriend stopped in her tracks, letting out a small noise of disgust and confusion. As we examined the mysterious lump on the ground, we realized how eerie it truly was. Lying in front of our feet was a dead squirrel, which wouldn't seem as abnormal, but the squirrel didn't look just dead. It looked like the life was sucked out of it. The squirrel was in a shriveled-up position, sharp, fang-like teeth still in its mouth, as well as its sunken-in eyes. The squirrel was entirely black, every inch of it. Not a hint of variation or discoloration, no lighter tones tucked into the folds of its limbs. Its body showed no signs of decay, just a uniform, unnatural blackness. The body had no bugs flying around, despite me constantly getting bit by them throughout the walk. It had no odor, no smell of death lingered near it. We couldn't understand how an animal could lose its life so entirely without another creature coming to claim it as food. In the middle of the woods in spring, it felt unnatural, no predator stepping in to carry on the cycle of life. My girlfriend said from the top of her head to the bottom of her toes, she felt a hot vibration flow through every nerve ending in her body. At the same time, I felt a deep pressure that caused every joint in my body to tense up, as well as my chest, getting so tight I started to believe someone punched me the day before. Without hesitation, we decided to turn around, as we are very into trusting our intuition. As we made our journey back to the car, barely a mile out into the trail, my girlfriend turns to me and asks me if I heard that. I shut my trap and listen, only hearing the leftover echoes of what she heard. She said she could barely make it out, but sounded like a woman screaming, "Help me." We waited a beat before continuing our walk, trying to beat the now quickly setting sun. We walked in silence, focused on getting the fuck out, both of our bad feeling increasing with every step we take. I began to hear the screams myself, but they were sounding further and further away, which I found odd, because from where my girlfriend initially heard the screams to where we were now, the individual screaming would have had to quickly jump in a car and drive another mile or so away from us. That's how quickly these screams got further and further away. As I thought about it, I had a realization that made my stomach drop. I told my girlfriend that we just needed to get out, and we needed to get out now as the screams continued and got further. We exited the forest just as the green flash of the sun appeared, and the screams just came to stop. I explained to my girlfriend about a Filipino urban legend I grew up with about a certain aswang. Manananggal or tiktik, a demon creature that in the daylight will disguise itself as a human, dog, cat, or any normal creature you see in your day-to-day, but when it becomes dusk, it turns into a soul-sucking vampire, and what's it's most infamous for is the further it sounds, the closer it is. Story 4, I moved into an extremely haunted house in Indiana. I moved into a house in Indiana a few months ago. It seemed perfect at the time, not too big, not too small, decent price, quiet neighborhood. The moment I walked in and shut the door, though, I felt something was wrong. It was this heavy, uneasy feeling in my chest like the house didn't want me there. I brushed it off as moving stress and started unpacking. The very first full day, I went into the kitchen and found one of the upper cabinets wide open. I distinctly remembered closing it earlier. I shut it again and thought maybe the latch was loose. The next day I was in the living room when I heard the cabinet creak open and then shut by itself. I walked in and it was open again. I still kept telling myself it was just an old house thing. That night it got real. I was lying in bed when I heard slow footsteps in the hallway. Not normal walking, slow, dragging steps like someone sneaking around. They'd stop right outside my bedroom door for what felt like minutes. I lived completely alone. No pets, no roommates. I laid there frozen, listening. This happened almost every night after that. Then the nightmares started, and that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. The first bad one, I woke up from screaming. In the dream, I was in my bed, but the room was freezing. I looked up and there was a man hanging from the ceiling right above me, rope around his neck, body swaying. His face was purple and swollen, eyes bulging open, staring straight down at me. His head slowly turned, even though his neck was clearly broken, and he opened his mouth like he was trying to say my name. I woke up gasping, covered in sweat. After that, the hanging man was in nearly every nightmare. Sometimes he'd be hanging in the hallway when I tried to run. Sometimes in the kitchen, dripping something dark. One of the worst ones, he was hanging inches above my face, rope creaking, black liquid dripping from his mouth onto me. It burned, I couldn't move. His cold, dead fingers brushed my cheek right before I jolted awake. That morning I had 3 fresh scratches across my chest that weren't there when I went to sleep. I got scared enough that I bought a bunch of wooden crosses and hung them up all over the house. One right above my bed, one by the front door, one in the hallway, one in the kitchen. I'm not even super religious, but I figured it couldn't hurt. It made things worse. A couple nights later I woke up to a loud thump. The cross above my bed was on the floor, turned completely upside down. The nail was still in the wall. I hung it back up straight. The next day the hallway cross was upside down. Then the kitchen one. No matter how many times I fixed them, they'd be inverted again. One afternoon I came home from the store, and every single cross in the house was flipped upside down at the same time. That really shook me. The activity kept escalating hard. Cabinets would slam so loud it sounded like they were going to break. Footsteps followed me from room to room, even during the day. I'd feel ice-cold hands grab my shoulder or brush the back of my neck. The whispers turned into clear voices saying my name and telling me to stay. Sometimes I'd hear laughing, low and nasty, coming from inside the walls. The final straw came one night. I woke up around 3 a.m. to every cabinet in the kitchen slamming open and shut at the same time, super fast, like something was raging. When I got up to check, the hanging man was standing in the hallway, fully visible, rope still around his neck, head tilted at that horrible angle. He wasn't in a dream this time. He took a dragging step toward me. I ran back into my room, locked the door, and didn't come out until daylight. That same morning I found new scratches all over my arms. I couldn't take it anymore. The fear was constant. I was barely sleeping, jumping at every sound, and I felt like I was losing my mind. 2 days later I packed up whatever I could as fast as possible, loaded my car, and got the hell out of there. I didn't even clean the place or give proper notice. I just left the keys on the counter and drove away. Story 5, haunted room at Mom's old home. It happened sometime around 2011, during monsoon season. My mom had gone to visit relatives, so it was just me, my younger brother, and my cousin staying at our grandmother's old house for a week. The house was strange even during daytime. Long hallways, wooden doors that never fully closed, and one room upstairs nobody used anymore. My grandmother always kept that room locked, and said the previous owner died there years ago. Every night around 2 or 3 a.m., we'd hear furniture moving upstairs, not footsteps. heavy dragging sounds. At first we thought it was rats or old pipes. But one night the power went out during a storm, and the noises became louder than ever. My cousin joked that we should finally check upstairs, so we did. We used our phone flashlights and slowly climbed the stairs. The sound stopped the moment we reached the hallway. Everything was silent. Then we noticed the locked room door was slightly open. I swear it was locked before. Inside, the room smelled wet, like clothes left in rain for days. There was an old mirror facing the bed, and dozens of small paper charms taped around the walls. Some looked burned at the edges. My brother suddenly whispered, "Why is someone standing in the mirror?" The thing is, there was nobody inside the room except us. But in the mirror, there was a woman standing behind my cousin. Long hair covering her face, bare feet, completely still. We turned around instantly, nothing there. When we looked back at the mirror, she was closer. My cousin panicked and dropped his phone. The flashlight started spinning across the floor, and for a split second the entire room lit up. That's when we saw wet footprints leading from the mirror to the door. Not human footprints. They looked backwards. We ran downstairs so fast, my brother fell halfway down the staircase. We locked ourselves in the living room until morning. The next day, my grandmother came back early. When we told her everything, she went completely silent. Then she asked one question: "Did any of you look directly into the mirror for too long?" We said yes. She immediately covered the mirror with a white cloth and nailed the room shut again. Years later, after she died, the house was demolished. But before it was destroyed, workers found something inside the wall behind that mirror, another room small, windowless. And inside it, there was a wooden chair facing the exact spot where the mirror used to be. Story 6, Will-O-Wisp. I'm having a good time writing here, so here's another interesting, scary in an unknown and abysmal kind of way story. When I was 22, 2018, I started dating a really sweet guy, let's call him Mark, from Macon, Georgia, USA. He was a Southern dream, curly hair, played football in his high school days, loved his mama, and was rowdy. We were total opposites. I was a shy writer. I loved anything terrifying and spent most of my off time listening to creepy podcasts, scrolling the Books of Horror Facebook page, and haunting bookstores. Well, Mark wanted to impress me. Mark was closeted, and I believe it was our distinct differences that made him like me so much. If any of you guys know about Macon, you know that it's a historic city, and all the surrounding towns are little more than forests and old back roads dotted with houses. Well, for our 4th or 5th date, Mark picked me up in his 03 blue F-150 after 11 p.m. I was a waiter working closing shift, and drove me up to Forsyth, a little quiet town beside Macon. There was a little dirt road through the woods that had an old wooden bridge. I swear, an honest-to-God wooden bridge, headless horseman style. The game plan was we were going to park his truck on that wooden bridge, listen to the creek underneath, drink a 12-pack of warm beer, and he was going to tell me all his spookiest stories of his time running the hills and forests outside of Macon as he grew up. And maybe, if he was lucky, he'd get some by the end of the night. He told me about how that bridge was haunted. He said that one time he parked there after a football game, drank himself to sleep in his old truck, and woke up to handprints all over the windows. He told me that sometimes you'd hear women screaming out in the woods, but that you couldn't go help them because it was mountain lions trying to lure you into the woods to eat you, and that some fishermen would tell you there were black panthers out there too. He told me of the ghost of an old homeless man who drowned under that very bridge we were parked on. Told me about Whistler's Native American legends of some kind of ghast or nature sprite that whistled. The closer the whistle sounded, the farther away it was. He didn't know what happened if it got you, but he didn't want to find out, and over my wonderful and short years with Mark, I heard them myself. The whistlers, at least, are very real. Mark did his job well enough that despite the alcoholic bravery, I was spooked. I was shivering even though it was a muggy and humid late spring night. I wanted to go back to his room and laugh it all off with a colder beer and a warmer bed. Right before we called it, a night headlights came down the dirt road towards us. This was not a modern bridge. I have pictures of us out there somewhere I'll try to find, no guard rails. and only room for one vehicle at a time. While we prayed it wasn't a cop, Mark drove forward and pulled off the shoulder of the road, and we let the car pass. Still anxious it was a cop, closeted and drinking on the road. We watched the car in the rearview drive over the bridge and disappear. Right as the tension let up, and we were laughing it off, I saw a light in the rearview and thought the midnight car was returning. But no. I have no other way to explain this than we were just parked on that single-passenger bridge. There was no one, to our knowledge, around, and that a total of 4 minutes had passed since pulling off to the shoulder of the road. In the dead center of the bridge, right where we were just parked, was a single log smoldering and blazing on fire. Half drunk and half terrified and anxious, we got out to investigate, and it was true. Right where we were parked just a few moments ago was a single rustic log burning. I vividly remember the log had cracks running all over it, and the fire was coming from within it. As a southern boy myself, I am no stranger to making campfires, and I have never seen anything like this in my life, and never have again. There were white-hot cracks all over the log as it burned from within where there was previously no log, no fire, and exactly where we were parked only minutes ago. Mark towed the log with his boot and told me his folks taught him about will-o-wisps, some kind of something that haunted dense forests and used fires and lights to lure victims to God knows what, maybe to drown them. I remember him saying. We looked uneasily at the water, returned to his truck and floored it to his house, where I assured him he had definitely impressed and terrified me. I know this isn't some crazy wild ride of a story, but it's very true. If this gets any traction, I'll try to dig up mine and Mark's pictures, as we spent many summer days on that wooden bridge over the years before he died an unfortunate early death. He died very young, very adventurous, and died right off that road with the wooden bridge. He was a hell of a storyteller, because most of his spooky stories were real, or at least he thought they were, and you never know what you'll find when you're out in the Appalachian woods after the sun sets. Story 7, something followed me to my mom's house. A year ago, my life fell apart when my husband unexpectedly passed away. While I was still drowning in grief, my mom became severely ill. Since she lives alone in her old house, I packed my bags and moved in with her to manage her treatment and take care of her full time. Almost as soon as I arrived, the house started feeling incredibly heavy. My mom, who was bedridden most of the day, kept telling me she heard strange noises in the hallway. She claimed she could hear faint voices calling out her name. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself she was just hallucinating from her medication. I really didn't want to scare myself. But a couple of days later, it was my turn. And what terrified me the most was that it happened in broad daylight. I had just finished doing the house chores, and my mom had drifted off to sleep. I walked into her bedroom just to check on her. The moment I stepped through the door, my blood ran cold. Standing right next to her bed was a woman dressed entirely in black. I could see her face with horrifying clarity. Her skin was a sickening, deathly pale, and her eyes were massive. She was staring straight at me, eyes wide open, as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. I froze. I completely lost my ability to react or scream. Out of sheer desperate panic, I covered my eyes with both hands and started praying out loud right there, standing in the middle of the room. I prayed for a solid minute with my eyes covered. When I finally gathered the courage to pull my hands away, she was gone. My mom was still sleeping peacefully. 2 nights later, things escalated. I was sleeping in the bedroom right next to my mom's. I laid down, and just as I was drifting off to sleep, I noticed a dark shadow standing right at the foot of my bed. It wasn't moving, it was completely static. But out of nowhere, I felt a violent yank. Something invisible grabbed me and started dragging me off the bed. It was a sickening sensation, and the force was so sudden that my blanket was literally thrown into the air, landing across the room. I panicked, bolted out of bed, and ran into my mom's room to sleep with her. I didn't close my eyes for the rest of the night. The breaking point happened yesterday, when my sister came over to visit us. A few hours before she arrived, I was sitting alone at the kitchen table eating a quick lunch. Suddenly, I felt a sharp, agonizing pain in both of my wrists. It was a suffocating pressure, exactly as if someone was grabbing my arms and squeezing them with brute force. The moment I heard my sister's car pull up outside, I ran out of the house. I was sobbing hysterics. I told her I couldn't take it anymore, that I needed to get out of that place right now. She freaked out, trying to calm me down, and asked what was wrong. When I told her about what just happened in the kitchen, she pulled up my sleeves. We both went completely pale. Deep, purple bruises were already forming around both of my wrists. You could perfectly see the shape of human fingers pressed into my skin. I broke down completely. "It's him," I cried to my sister. "It's my husband. He doesn't want me to leave our old house. He's looking for me. He won't let me go." But my sister grabbed my face and told me to stop. "No, Lola," she said. "This isn't your husband. This is something evil." She immediately took action. She contacted an aunt of ours, who is very close to the local parish priest. The next morning, the priest came over, blessed every single room in the house, and gave me a personal blessing as well. Mercifully, it worked. Since that day, the house has been completely quiet, and whatever was lingering here seems to be gone. But there's a detail that keeps me up at night. A few weeks ago, I found out through some extended family members that my late husband's family was heavily involved in some dark witchcraft practices back in their hometown. Nothing has ever been proven, and honestly, I'm too terrified to dig deeper. Story 8. My phone sends my boyfriend messages in the middle of the night. There may or may not be a scientific explanation for what we have experienced. It seems too coincidental. So let us dive in from the start. It all started with one random night in the middle of January when my boyfriend and I said our usual good night and hit the bed and drifted off to sleep. However, when I woke up the next day, I saw I had a video call from him at 3:25 a.m. It was unusual, and I asked him about it, only to find out that his phone had been dead the whole night, and he plugged it in the next morning. So the possibility of a video call from a dead phone, unlikely. A few days later, we go to bed the same usual good night routine. When I wake up next day morning and check my phone, I see a text sent from my phone to his at 2:59 a.m. Just one single text. That's it. I was asleep the whole night and have no memory of ever unlocking my phone and messaging him at all. The next day again, the same thing happens. A different message to him at the same time, 2:59 a.m. Just one single message, but a different one this time. Again, I have no memory of this ever happening. We found it eerie, but had possible conclusions that it could be a case of server reset or some sort of network issue. And then it stopped, until a few weeks ago, when similar events started occurring again, and more severe. We were texting around 1 a.m. when we said our good night and drifted off to sleep. I was really tired and slept the whole night without waking up in the middle, and the next day, it happened again. We saw messages sent from my phone to his phone at 1:56 a.m. The messages read, "Baby, it's 2." Which is a pretty odd thing to say for myself, because if I wake up from my sleep, I would usually ask if he's awake first or text about me not getting sleep. The tone of the texts did not sound like me at all. Those text messages in a way proved it could not be me writing it, but there's no one else using my phone either. And the most recent incident happened last week. I slept off at 2 a.m. and was pretty tired and exhausted from the day's work. My boyfriend, however, stayed up at night finishing his work, and while he was texting me, he got a few messages from my phone at 3:08 a.m. He saw it instantly and replied to it, but my phone went offline soon after. What's more scary is the texts that were sent from my phone were not exactly related to what he was talking about. I was asleep the whole night. We still have no idea of what caused all of these texts. And the fact that it only happens in the middle of the night and never during the day doesn't make it any better. Have you experienced anything like this, or have any clue of what might be a possible explanation to this? Story 9, the figure in the mirror, particularly not that creepy compared to the stories here. But I just want to share my experience since it has been bothering me ever since. This happened in our living room. To give you context, our living room has a mirror, and right in front of that mirror is the bathroom door. When the bathroom door is open, you can see the bathroom mirror from the living room mirror. 6 years ago, I was looking at our living room mirror. It was a quiet afternoon, and I was alone. While I was fixated on myself, I took a glance in the middle part of the mirror, and when I did, I saw a black figure in our bathroom mirror since the bathroom door was open. I remember it so vividly that I cannot get the picture out of my mind even now. The figure was a boy, almost like a child. I got scared and ran on top so fast. That was my first ever encounter. For the following months, nothing happened, and no one believed me when I told the story since I was a child at the time. But one day, while I was alone in my bedroom at the second floor, I heard someone calling my nickname. It was my mom's voice. I went down and responded, but no one was there, and then I remembered that my parents were not home. This did not happen once, but twice. This time my parents were home. My nickname was called again, and when I went down, I asked them if they had called me, and they too were confused because none of them called my name. For the past years, nothing really happened. But recently, I've been waking up at around 12:03 a.m. to study since it was total silence, and I could focus more. To note, I wasn't scared at this moment since I was hyper-fixated on studying. You know that reflex you get when someone passes by, the action where you raise your head because you feel someone/see someone passing by. Context, I was alone. Again, my bedroom door was wide open and you could see our hallway, which was pitch black. The only light was illuminating from my own room. It was exactly 3 a.m. when I started having reflexes of lifting my head because I thought someone was passing by. I was not scared at this moment, so I couldn't have been imagining things, and it happened thrice at 3 a.m. Another occurrence that has happened recently was our tap in the bathroom constantly fluctuating. No one even opened the tap, and it would just run by itself. For context, our tap would need to be pushed up to open and back down to close. At this point, Im just used to it and chose to disregard it. Context, our house is like 20 years old, so that may be a factor. Do you have any idea what entity it is? Or why it's doing this? Story 10, true camping story, not sure if this is scary or not, but it was definitely strange. I'm 17F and like camping with my dad and brothers. But one time when we went camping, something really confused me and my dad. I can't remember the exact day, but it was last year when we went camping with a family friend and my brother. We were all very excited to camp, and so we were all happy and joking and things. We went to an inn that was next to the forest we were camping in, and my dad and his friend brought beers before we went to find a spot to camp. The last time we had camped, which was in Wales, we did a midnight walk down this track where we saw bats, and it was really cool. But the walk me and my dad did last year was really strange. We had noticed from the tracker we had that there was a little church near where we were camping, and so we thought to go and check it out. We saw deers in the trees, or at least we saw their glowing eyes, but then my dad saw something in front of us. A set of glowing eyes, but they weren't green like the deer's. They were like an amber color. I didn't see them, but my dad was not letting go of the fact that they were there. We didn't get to see the church, for it wasn't there. All we found was private property, so we went back to the camp. There was nothing on the way back, but when we were going to go to sleep, I saw the orange eyes in the trees well outside our camp, watching us. I pointed at it and, not going to lie, began pulling at my dad like an 8-year-old child. But they vanished, and we never saw them again. This is all true, and both me and my dad are still confused as to what it was we saw, and whatever it was stopped me sleeping at night. Another thing, it couldn't have been a wolf, because wolves were extinct from my country years ago. So I am still wondering what it was that was watching us, and decided to follow me and my dad back to the camp.